Hey everyone, Kibler here, and I wanted to take a look at what has been announced that is coming up in Hearthstone with the new Year of the Raptor. I also wanted to talk a little bit about how we have progressed and how it looks like we might progress and what might need to happen in that time over the course of the next year to sort of deal with a lot of the issues that I talked about in my State of Hearthstone video at the end of last year. I know that that video resonated with a lot of people, got a lot of great feedback on it, which is part of the reason that I'm doing this video now, talking about kind of where we're at and where we need to be. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Year of the Raptor was just announced. It was actually already announced in the big, Warcraft Blizzard Direct thing or whatever, which is a little bit weird that they announced all of the both expansions and mini sets, both theme, name, and everything already, right? So we know that the Emerald Dream is the upcoming set. And then, we know a great deal throughout the year. But we did get a trailer again, which was nice. It did appear to be a trailer for the full year, rather than, an individual one set by set. But it is nice to see, that level of investment and excitement with Hearthstone. A lot of people were like, Hearthstone's back, it was a fun trailer with a song again, which I know a lot of people missed. So it's nice to have that back. We also got the details about the core set for the Year of the Raptor that will be coming soon. A lot of cards that are leaving, a lot of cards that are being added, a lot of cards that are being changed, notably some new designs as well that are coming, including Babbling Bookcase, who apparently wants to cast 2 spells, a new Death Knight card, Fatrick, and then there was one other new card. Oh yes, Poison Breath, another Death Knight card, which is returning alongside Death Chiller, which seems like a pretty powerful possible combo for those of you following along at home. But I'm not going to go into every single thing that is in and out. I do want to talk about a few of the sort of big picture things that I think are quite important. The Soul Stealer, Corpse Bride, Might of Menethil, and Scourge are some of the very notable cards that are leaving from Death Knight. I know that Scourge being randomly generated off of Discover effects was one of the sort of banes of a lot of Death Knight matchups, historically speaking, although it hasn't really been super relevant for a while. One card that I'm excited to see back in Demon Hunter is Zai the Incredible. I played a Highlander Demon Hunter that used Zai to copy key pieces back in the day, and it was a lot of fun, so I'm looking forward to playing with that, even though Demon Hunter does tend to struggle to play slower, more controlling styles of decks. That is a card that wants to support. Hunter is losing Kill Command. What's going on? What world are we living in? But we do see a Terror Scale Stalker coming back in a buffed form. This is a 2/3 for 2 rather than a 3/3 for 3. Also, Mountain Bear is a powerful death rattle coming back for Hunter. As mentioned, there is the Babbling Bookcase coming in for Mage. Babbling Book itself is going away, so you won't be able to team those up together. I am a little bit sad that we're seeing Arcanologist rotate at the same time that Oasis Ally is coming back, because that was one of the things that you really wanted in Arcanologist deck, was something you could potentially play out that would be impactful in a minion-based matchup, but unfortunately is not to be, as that is rotating at the same time. We are seeing Paladin is getting Anachronos, very powerful tempo card, along with Underlight Angling Rod. So obviously we have some Merfolk stuff coming back, along with the Red Scale Dragon Tamer. Notably, Priest, most importantly, losing Crimson Clergy, which has been really central to a lot of Priest strategies for a while. We did see a lot of nerfs to overheal Priest time after time. Crimson Clergy was one of the things that really made a lot of those decks possible. So I am going to be a little bit sad to see that go. But they are getting Powered Shield back. It's been a while. Powered Shield, has not been a part of the core set for quite some time. But a nice sort of cycling effect for Priest that can boost the early game board presence, alongside Light Shower Elemental, very powerful death rattle defensive minion, and Natalie Sling getting a buff. Rogue is getting some of my favorite cards in the form of Shaku, Undercity Huckster, who's going to be hucking, funnel cakes left and right. Probably a good thing that Spectral Cutlass is leaving at the same time as some of these Thief Rogue cards, because, especially with all of the weapon buffs that do exist, though some of them are rotating out, Spectral Cutlass with all that support could get a little nuts. Shaman Kragwa is coming back. I'm a huge Kragwa enjoyer. Super fun card, although not alongside the what was the Echo unstable like evolve effect that I always loved playing a million times in a row, and then Kragwa and getting a bunch of them back. But super fun card. Wailing Vapor is coming back, so Elemental Shaman perhaps on the table. Crucially, Warlock is losing Defile. Twisting Nether also rotating out, which I believe has always been available for Warlock. But there is, at least right now, there's Black Hole. But the loss of Defile in particular will leave a black hole in the removal suite for Warlock, although it hasn't necessarily been a card that's seen a ton of play, thanks to things like Forge of Wills, though that, of course, is rotating alongside the Titan set, along with everything else. But some cool stuff coming back. Despicable Dreadlord, buffed. Not nearly as powerful as it once was because minions' health has tended to go up over time. Things have been a lot harder to deal with. But Warrior is losing Town Crier, who has obviously been a tremendously powerful element of a lot of Warrior decks. One of the craziest things to me is how many Town Criers that you'd see played in decks that just played Ziliax over the course of the time both of those are available in Standard. So probably a good thing. I do think that there's something to be said for the sort of tutor-style card draw that does exist in Hearthstone, but I think that one of the things that we do see from it, in the case of something like Town Crier that's super efficient, is just how powerful it is to always be able to find specific cards, and that's something we're going to talk a little bit more about when I get to kind of the state of Hearthstone and what I think needs to change moving forward, but no spoilers just yet. Neutral, notably, all of the big dragon aspects are rotating out. Not necessarily cards that were hugely powerful in the standard format or anything, but I think it's indicative that we're going to get new versions of them, considering we are going to the Emerald Dream. Obviously, Ysera is a big element going on there, but I'm hopeful we'll see new, very cool dragon aspects, because I am obviously a dragon enjoyer. The Giants, Mountain Giant, Molten Giant, and Sea Giant are all leaving. Zola's leaving. No more, you already couldn't do any more infinite stuff with Fizzle, but, reducing the power level of that sort of stuff. And speaking of the power level of stuff going away, or rather being reduced, Charge. I think a lot of people were a little bit suspect when it was revealed that Leroy Jenkins and South Sea Deckhand were going to be returning in last year's core set, and they have killed a lot of people in a single turn over the course of that time. And we are going to be seeing those rotate out, which I personally enjoy, especially considering we're seeing a lot more sort of mid-range and cool value style minions coming in. I'm super stoked to see Curator coming back. Not only that, but it is buffed 5-mana Curator now. It's a very different world than he used to live in. We're also seeing Netherspite Historian coming back and being buffed. So I, for one, am really excited for the rise of the Menagerie, the return of the Menagerie, because that style of deck I always feel is really interesting, both to play, because I think that decks that focus more on board-based, minion-based combat tend to have more interesting gameplay overall, or either lead to more interesting games at least than things that kind of do their own thing or just look to clear the board every turn. And also the deck building of them is very interesting, because figuring out the specific balance of various minion types and everything that you want to include in your deck, I find to be a really, really interesting challenge. And I'm very excited for, having that kind of deck building puzzle to figure out with the new core set. So, obviously, we didn't touch on everything. That's kind of an overview of a lot of the stuff that's going to be coming with the core set. And we do obviously have Emerald Dream coming. So there's going to be a lot to learn about that and the impact that all of that will have on the standard rotation. But what I want to talk about now is the Starcraft set. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that the Starcraft set was super fun at first. And in order to talk about this meaningfully, I think it's really important that we talk about some important concepts in game design, and specifically in trading card game design. A lot of people talk about like power creep, right? They talk about power creep, and a lot of people use power creep to just generally mean when a card is more powerful than another card. And that's not really what power creep means. What power creep means is sort of the steady increase in power in a game. That isn't necessarily always a bad thing, right? It's not necessarily like, oh, power creep is this interminable march of progress where things are always going to get stronger and stronger. And sometimes power creep is strictly a good thing. For instance, obviously Curator is getting buffed in this, and it was a reasonably powerful card in Hearthstone's history, but it is now coming back 2 mana less. That doesn't necessarily mean that this is because power creep is out of control and everything's totally nuts, and it could mean that, right? But I don't think it necessarily means that. But power creep, I think, did a valuable service to Hearthstone over time, because I think that the early days of Hearthstone, the relative power level of cards versus hero powers was too low. I think that, for instance, if you look at early Hearthstone core set, say core set Naxxramas Hearthstone or classic set Naxxramas Hearthstone, Warlock and Hunter hero powers in particular were just bananas. Warrior hero power in a lot of matchups was actually insane, because the value of a card that did damage was often less than just pressing that button. So I think that it is actually valuable. It's a good thing for Hearthstone that the power level of cards over time has gone up compared to those hero powers, because I think the game is less fun when it's about pressing your button all the time, because it's, we saw that with Gen and Baku and things like that. I think the game is more fun when it's more about the cards, right? The cards that you play, and not just I am playing this class and thus I have this button and that's the most important thing in this game. Face Hunter in early Hearthstone was all about just trying to splash some damage in here and there and press your hero power basically every turn. And I think that, again, hero powers, they do a job in Hearthstone, which mostly is that you don't feel like you have nothing to do when you don't have a card that you can or want to play. Of course, that doesn't really work for Priest, because Priest is a hero power that most of the time doesn't do anything, which is why we ended up with Overheal, but I digress. But yeah, I think that form of power creep in Hearthstone is a good thing. There's also the form of power creep that you have over the course of the life cycle of a year, of an expansion, and not even just expansion, but multiple expansions. When you come toward a rotation, right, there's the most pressure on the cards that are released at the end of a rotation to be impactful and to be powerful, or else they don't matter, right? And a lot of people are they're just trying to sell new cards, so they make the new stuff powerful. It's yes, the goal of the game, right, is to sell cards. It's a trading card game. It's a collectible card game. But that's not nefarious or anything. That's kind of just a clear thing. But 2, if you didn't want the new cards, you'd also complain, well, those new cards didn't do anything. They were boring. This expansion sucks. This mini set sucks. So there's a lot of pressure on the cards that are released later, because there's so many more cards that already exist and so many more strategies that are already fleshed out, that they need to be more impactful in order to feel like they matter in the metagame that they're released into. There is the most pressure, like I said, on the last thing released over the course of a cycle, because there's the biggest card pool, and a mini set has the fewest cards with which to make an impact, right? And in this particular mini set's case, it is the Starcraft mini set, right? So when you're doing this crossover collaboration with another one of your properties, it is ultra important, if you want this collaboration to feel like it matters, that these cards feel like they matter, right? I don't think that there has ever been a set of cards that has released in the game of Hearthstone, and maybe in most games, that has had more pressure on them to be impactful than the ones that were released in the Starcraft mini set, right? There's so many factors that are contributing to these cards have to be good. And there's some interesting things that the team did to make sure that the StarCraft cards were impactful. Obviously, the faction system means that there are more cards that are available to any given class than there typically would be through a mini set, right? Because if you can play all of the Protoss cards, the Terran cards, the Zerg cards, it's much more than you would get if there was a mini set where there'd be a couple cards, 3, 4 cards, whatever, for a particular class in that mini set. So that's kind of a cheat code for doing that, is hey, there's a broader pool of cards that any given class can play because we're doing this cross-faction thing. There's also the cheat code, and this is something that I don't know how much a lot of people really looked into. Every faction has a card that draws 2 cards of that faction. I talked a little bit about this when I was talking about Towncrier. Because cards that specifically draw for or search for other cards of a particular category or class or whatever, I guess class is a bad word to use here, but they can do a lot of things that, they obviously support, hey, I'm going to build this strategy. I'm going to, specifically build my deck around this, and I can feel better about building my deck around this relatively limited card pool because I have this card which specifically finds these other cards. And that's all well and good in sort of a broad card pool in a lot of cases, but like I think one of the starkest examples of this, and this isn't necessarily something that's problematic moving forward, because a lot of the cards rotate out, but it is a great example of how this style of design can be challenging to get right, is Hero Power Druid, right? The Hero Power Druid deck that exists right now on Ladder, it plays Chrono Boost, Construct Pylons, and Artanis, and that's it. So when you draw a Chrono Boost, you are extremely likely to draw Pylons Artanis. So the deck has a absurdly high likelihood of, by turn 5 or 6, being able to play Artanis, right? Despite having a single copy in the deck, as long as it draws a Chrono Boost, that Chrono Boost will very likely draw either the other Chrono Boost or Pylons and Artanis. It could draw Pylons, obviously, but like, you just have such a high chance because these cards cycle into one another, right? They draw into one another. Again, it's sort of a cheat code for making the package able to function, right? But it means a couple of things. One is that both just the general design of the StarCraft mini set, and the specific design of these cards that draw cards of their own faction, it means you see a lot of the same cards much more often, right? And I think that it was really fun the first few days of the StarCraft mini set. Where it's like, hey, there's all these new decks, like every class is something new and it feels fresh. And it's like a very like burn bright quickly kind of mini set. But I feel like it burned out fast, because the fact that there is so much overlap between the different classes, means that even when you play against different decks, they kind of feel like the same deck in many cases, right? You're seeing just a lot of the same tearing cards together. It's like, oh, cool, I died to another like launch into Jim Raynor launch across whatever class happens to be, happen to be playing against. Mostly Shaman, because they're better at, using the battle cry stuff, but Warrior too, and like, it's just kind of all runs together because despite these being different classes, a lot of the cards you're seeing are the same, and a lot of the actual gameplay patterns you're seeing are the same. You are seeing more of the same cards because each of these classes has cards that draw more of themselves, basically. And that exists in all the classes. And then I think that the gameplay of like Zerg, for instance, I do think Zerg probably has the most disparate gameplay. Like Zerg Warlock, Zerg Death Knight, Zerg Hunter, they all are they feel a bit different from one another, which is nice. I think more so than the Terran decks do. Obviously, the Terran Warrior deck is more about control, and the Terran Shaman deck is more about tempo, and the Terran Paladin deck is more about losing. They kind of muddle together. But specifically, I find the play pattern of the Zerg deck in Death Knight to be atrocious. A lot of people have both complained about Infestor, and also claimed that Infestor's fine because of looks at win rate. My biggest complaint about Infestor has nothing to do with how powerful it is. It has to do with the play pattern that generates and the built-in confusion that anyone of any experience level is very likely to run into. Specifically, the Infestor giving you an aura effect that, increases the size of all of your Zerg for the rest of the game. Obviously, a lot of the cards that are synergizing with this are rotating out. So, we're not necessarily worried about getting like Yodeler into infinity, but like there are obviously going to be more Death Rattle synergies. We just saw, like I said, the Terrascale Stalker, so we're going to have more Death Rattle synergies in Hunter. So maybe it's not doing that in Death Knight anymore. Maybe it's back to doing it in Hunter. Who knows? But the fact that the aura effect is just such a confusing thing in terms of how it works in the game of Hearthstone. Even experienced players will consistently make mistakes based on it. And even like if they think they know, there'll be elements that like don't work how they expect. Like the fact that silencing the aura on one of the things, silencing a minion that is buffed by the Infestor aura, does not remove the stats. And there's been bugs too, where like if you like deafen a minion buffed by the Infestor aura, it resets it to its base stats. Even removing damage from it and then doesn't kill it sometimes. That's obviously a bug rather than an intended thing, but it is because of the nature of the intention of this being an aura effect. And in particular, the fact that there's even internal to the package a bunch of reborn effects. There's like Viper, right? That is going to give your guys reborn. And the fact that when you kill a thing with Reborn that has the Infestor buff, it gets bigger, right? Like Reborn says, comes back at 1 health. It's like, actually, this came back at 7. It was at 4, I killed it, and now it's 7, right? And that's super unintuitive and very frustrating, and just generally, I think, overall not a great play pattern, because when it functions, right, it is really like overshadowing any kind of other like minion-based strategy that is specifically built around, like, you know, even built around buffing or like just whatever. If it's just another minion-based strategy, like, okay, well, the game went this number of turns, I got this effect, all my guys are always bigger than yours, I win. And it's just not that fun, right? I think there's a number of things that need to change with the Starcraft mini set in order for the Year of the Raptor to not just be the Year of Starcraft, right? And again, it's not even necessarily about individual cards, right? It's about these packages and play patterns that are so parasitic, right? And by parasitic in a game design term, we mean things that specifically want to be played with one another, right? Like a parasitic thing is like all the things that are like reduced cost for Protoss minions, right? It's like, okay, I want to play Protoss minions, reduced cost Protoss minions, or Protoss spells, and, you know, my Colossus or whatever. Like, I want to play, you know, just a bunch of Starship things because all my Starship things like build up a bigger Starship and play together. You know, I want to play a bunch of Zerg because all my Zerg get buffed, or I have these various things. So there's like just so many of the cards just ask you to play with more of themselves, and it really pushes out other disparate designs, right? Other disparate deck builds. And one of the things that I found the most frustrating about the Starcraft mini set, when, you know, even when I first heard about it, right, was like, oh, this means these are going to be a bunch of like insular things because they need to be in order to support their own themes, and we're not going to get stuff for other decks. One of the things that was most frustrating to me specifically was that they just introduced Draenei, right? They just introduced the Draenei like minion type, and then they're like, well, the next mini set is not going to have Draenei, right? Draenei are not quite there when they're introduced, and we are not going to give them any kind of support because we're making Terran, Zerg, and Protoss. Which, you know, it is putting the game in a weird spot, because it's like, yes, the StarCraft stuff is cool. I had a lot of fun with it at first, but I got very frustrated about a week or so in when I was like, okay, well, there's nothing else new for me to play with, because all these cards just care about playing with one another, and there's nothing that's synergistic with other stuff unless it was like, you know, already playing like Warrior Starship stuff because you just have Hydration Station and want to just keep launching giant things, you know? So I do think that it was great to ensure that the StarCraft mini set had the kind of impact that, based on all the pressures on it from both its position in the release cycle, its nature as a mini set, and its sort of need to be successful as the overlap between Hearthstone and StarCraft, it was great at first. But I'd love to see some changes to it, specifically moving into next year, so that we don't just see more of the same. I'm not going to go into necessarily all the specifics that I think should be changed. Broadly speaking, I want to see Infestor be less oppressive in you know, minion style games and less confusing. I could think it could easily be something that's like your Zerg anywhere get +1/+1, instead of being this aura effect that buffs anything no matter how they come out. You can still have some small Zerg coming off a spawning pool or being created by other things, and you don't just have this stacking buff that is confusing too, because Reborn things will come back at 1, like their mechanics says they do. I'd love to see the Starships be a bit less impactful on launch. I think that there's too many things that are too easily lethal with, you know, the damage to face stuff. I'd love to see the Starship pieces that do damage, other than the 5 damage one, not go face, or maybe make none of them go face, so they're all board control based, and you just don't get exploded by like the exhaust pipe of your opponent's Starship going off as they launch it into space. But mostly, I would like to see this kind of be a learning experience for the team, and, you know, because I think that yeah, they kind of did it. It was a major challenge, you know, to release something that was at least initially successful as the StarCraft mini set. But I think it's pretty clear that something's got to give, because otherwise, like I said, the Year of the Raptor will be the Year of StarCraft. And I am at least hopeful with a lot of the news that we've heard. A lot of, you know, we've got a new board. We've got a new trailer coming out. We've got like cool other cosmetic stuff like pets that were announced. We even have actual focus and announcements talk about the esports program. And obviously with the return of the Chinese market, that was huge for competitive Hearthstone. Maybe we'll even see in-person events come back. I would love that. I was very vocal last year about how unfortunate it was there were no live events for the Hearthstone community to like rally around like there have been in the past, and how important those are for the game to feel alive and special. So I'm hopeful that we see live events come back. I'm hopeful that we see, I don't want to say responsive, more responsible, balancing both, of stuff moving forward, as well as taking a hard look at a lot of the stuff that exists in Hearthstone right now that kind of was in this arms race against a lot of play patterns and cards that I think were not healthy over the course of the past year of Hearthstone, and ensure that we don't continue that into the future. So that's it. That's my thoughts on the year of the Raptor and how to avoid it just being the year of Starcraft. So let me know what you think. Are there any things that really stand out to you as like, hey, this has got to go, that is not going to be going with the rotation, or just, anything you want to share about your thoughts on Hearthstone moving forward? So hope you enjoyed this. Hope this was at least entertaining, if not informative, educational, whatever it is that you're looking for. But, let me know if you want me to do more of these. So thanks for watching. I'll see you later.